Welcome. I started a series of interviews, some of which are with people who have been to my leadership course. And Johanna was interested to have a conversation, and this is it. We don't know exactly where this is going yet. And I'm happy to be surprised. Welcome, Johanna.
Welcome, Olaf. So I'm also super excited that I have the opportunity to interview you, because you always surprise me in any of our workshops we have done together. I always learn unexpected things. And I always feel very well taken, and everything what I'm saying is always very appreciated, and thank you for that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So our last workshop we did together was a workshop on leadership, and this was also very exciting because it's a very volatile topic, I would say. However, I for myself learned a lot of new things about how to create a good environment and how to develop relationships, and I would like to talk to you a bit further on all of that. So can you tell us what is the difference between a regular job role and a job as a leader in like a leadership job?
It's a really interesting question, because it hints at a few words that we use all the time: job, role, leadership. And when you start to actually define any of these terms for a meaningful conversation, you get on slippery ground very quickly, because they're like, so what all three words have in common, they are concepts that people use to explain something. So I look at something and I say, oh, that looks like work. Maybe the person gets paid, so maybe that's a job. So the job is explaining. So I see somebody cleaning the street, and job is an explanatory concept. Stupid word. I'm explaining something. I'm simplifying the complexity of reality by using that concept. Role is one end of a relationship. So in this relationship, currently right now, I am the interviewee, which is a role, and you are the interviewer, which is a role. In the training a couple of weeks ago, I was the trainer, you was the student. Both are roles, they define a relationship. Role in a company is a specific one. So it's a little bit like the role we take on stage when we play in a theater, play in a movie, because we become a member of something. So when I go on stage to play a role in a theater play, I become a member of the crew of the stage. I'm not sure what the English word is for the people who play together on stage.
Ensemble.
The ensemble, yeah. I become a member of the ensemble, and me as the member of the ensemble is different from me as just Olaf. I have this here to demonstrate, like, this is Olaf, right? And everybody knows Olaf, but that's again a different thing. So we have this. So we use these concepts to simplify the complexity, right? We talk about a human being, and a human being, this is called Olaf, has actually lots of different roles in lots of different contexts, lots of different personalities in lots of different contexts. But whenever we talk about a person, we talk about them as if they were a thing that didn't change. And in contrast to this thing, which is just a puppet, and if nothing happens to it, it won't change ever. In me, mentally and physically, there are lots of processes going on all the time that keep this thing the thing. Like, my brain needs to actually invest energy so that I keep thinking that I'm still the same person as I was yesterday or 10 minutes ago. So this is, once you look at it in detail, it's incredibly complex. And role is a useful simplification for us to interact with each other in different contexts, right? So we have the role of drivers in traffic, or the role of workers in an organization. And when we talk about a team, we might have some people doing the work, somebody else orchestrating, organizing the work, somebody else tracking the work. There might be different steps of the work with different specialities. So in software, we have designers and developers and testers, for instance, very often. So, and then the interesting question, what's the difference between a job role and a leadership role? You can define leadership. Again, leadership is an explanation, right? So I see a phenomenon usually between human beings. It's probably not between animals or between things. When we say leadership, it's usually a thing that happens between people. So it means it involves a relationship. And we assign the role of a leader to someone, and then the role of a follower or some other complementary role to the other person. What I like to say when we start a conversation about leadership in organizations or in a training context is that leadership is not a role. Leadership is an activity. Leadership is something you do. It's also an explanation for what you do for the people who view you as a leader. But it doesn't matter what your job role is. And I can give you a really, really lovely example. One is very well known and the other is not so well known. There was back in the time when the people at NASA were building their We Go to the Moon program. At some point late at night, some senator was found by security in cleaning somewhere where he shouldn't have been at that hour of the night. And the security guard asked that senator, like, hey, what are you doing here? And he was like, I'm helping our guys get to the moon. And that to me is leadership. So it's not just doing a job, it's trying to make a difference to something bigger. It doesn't have to be bigger, but so I'd skip the other example. It doesn't really help. So the idea when we talk about organizations nowadays, we very often talk about things like agile, new work, democratization, more autonomy, more teams instead of strict hierarchies. We talk about flexibility, adaptive organizations, you name it, right? Mm-hmm. And to me, that means that leadership stops being something that we assume somebody else is going to do, preferably at the top, preferably higher paid, preferably whatever, more knowledgeable, with more privilege, with more whatever, something we assume we don't have. But that leadership becomes something that is distributed through the organization as something that everybody is invited to, sometimes expected to take a lead in terms of making a difference. And that's also why I use in the course, I use the working definition for leadership. Leadership is making a difference with intention, because that gives all of us the possibility to say, oh yeah, so I'm leading somewhere in my job, somewhere in my life, somewhere in my work. And it also gives us an opportunity to check, okay, if I want to improve my leadership, I can improve the impact, I can improve the difference I'm making, and I can improve the intention. I can improve what I want. I can improve, I can think more clearly, be more specific, invest more time into reflecting what I really, really want, so that I can work towards that effect. To close, one participant in my course once said, agile leadership is not something that is done by a person. Agile leadership is a quality of the organization, and it means that leadership happens where it's needed, instead of where somebody decided long ago where it should be happening. And I like that definition a lot. So instead of assuming that there's an old way of leading and a new way of leading, and the new way is called agile because we call everything agile that is new and that we like, which is a different topic. But instead we say, okay, what we want in terms of agile leadership is we want the organization to be flexible enough that anyone feels invited to lead where it makes sense and where it helps us fulfill our mission or whatever our direction is.
Okay, so my understanding of this is, and tell me if I'm wrong, is that every employer is responsible for his own work, but also the work of his colleagues and his the work environment to an extent. However,
to an extent is a very important part in that sentence. Yes.
Yeah. However, like for like organizational reasons, we have a lot of companies who have a face of the company or someone who makes the final decisions in terms of where to go with this product. And maybe like a person like a janitor or a person like a secretary or another junior developer, for example, they don't necessarily make this type of decisions. So but how does this differ? Like, what is for you then the difference between these kind of leaders and these other leaders?
I think everybody has opportunities somewhere in their life to lead, to make a difference. And I think that people make different choices. And there's a difference, for instance, between some of us who go to work mainly to earn a living, to have a life, and then we lead that life mostly outside of work. And some of us choose to, and also some of us are lucky enough to have the ability to choose a job that is actually aligned with some interest, motivation, passion, talent, or whatever that you have, so that you can find something fulfilling in your work. I don't think everybody has that chance. This is something we can change as a society, and we are. And I also know not everybody wants that, or not everybody wants an equal amount of that. For some people, exchanging money for work is enough. For some people, exchanging money and have some nice colleagues that they meet every day is enough. And they don't need to make a dent in the universe, or be part of a bigger purpose or whatever. So that's different. And we have different kinds of organizations. For some organizations don't give a damn about purpose. And some organizations have a lot of purpose, like climate activist NGO has a lot of purpose. And some organizations in between are currently struggling with this topic because at the moment it's really fashionable to have purpose, and organizations believe right now that without publishing an important purpose, they won't get any employees, and they need to do this thing called employee branding, which is let's not go there. But I think there's something weird going on at the moment. We have lost orientation. Like 100 years ago, there was one organization that gave our life purpose. It was called the church. For some other people, there was also purpose in, I don't know, joining the army and fighting for your country and some other things. But mainly people went to work in order to work. And I don't think any of us wants to go back there. But we're currently struggling with how do we organize people who want purpose, organizations that just want to be organizations, organizations that have purpose. And yeah, so at the moment, there's this complexity going on. And I think the answers that we as an Agile community, for want of a better word, have tried so far, which basically was this single aimed solution. Every company needs a purpose, every company needs a vision and a mission, and every company needs values, and people need to identify with those, and you need to hire according to, etc. I think that's a dead-end street. I think that works well for some companies, and we love looking at those, and we see, oh, I want that as well, but I don't think it works for every organization, and it definitely does not work for every person. Some people just don't want that. And I have learned the hard way, because I've tried to make those people happy for a long time in my Agile coaching career, because I believed I know what will make these people happy. And yeah, I don't do that anymore. So the opportunity to lead will depend on the kind of organization you're in and the kind of role you have. So in a classical organization where you have typical hierarchy of bosses, some people are responsible for strategy, some people are responsible for some specific kind of leadership in a specific environment. Like as a project manager, I'm responsible for leading the project work of the people in my team, etc. Right? Their leadership opportunities are, let's say, very clearly distributed among people in a way that some people lead more and some people lead less. In other organizations, it's the other way around. They don't define a lot and they give people lots of freedom and they say, hey, you are all leaders. A very prominent example is Valve, who have published this handbook. They don't have a hierarchy. They just have one CEO who apparently doesn't, according to the book, I'm not sure if reality is that simple, doesn't actually execute a lot of his executive power, and people self-organize. So if you want to work on a project, you start it, you gain people around you, and then you take the lead, and anybody theoretically can do that. That has certain effects on the organization, on what the organization can and can't do well. Just again, a side topic, but I think to go back to your question, in different organizations, we will have different leadership opportunities, and some people like taking responsibility and some people like it less. I think this is greatly depending on conditions, but there's very probably also personal differences. Bless you. And there are times in our lives. So I remember, so I'm 53 now. I remember times in my life where I was really happy that I had a regular job. Somebody sent me somewhere. I had a rough idea of what I needed to do, etc. And there were times when I couldn't have done that at all, and I needed my autonomy, and I needed to make my own decisions. And at some point, I made the decision that I want to be independent, because that was important. And there were several times where I tried building an organization because I thought, in order to bring the things I want to bring into the world, I need to build an organization. And every time I started that, it limited my freedom, it limited my autonomy in a way that, in hindsight, I now know this is not feasible. So I, for the moment, might change in 10 years, but for the moment, I stopped attempting that, because my way of working works best when I'm on my own, and I do cooperate with partners, but I won't take the responsibility for build an organization, because that's something that, yeah, that kind of leadership at the moment doesn't work well for me.
Yeah, I guess along those lines is a bit the question, is if you are a single person, you are responsible first and foremost for yourself. And we always have, as human beings, the idea of having maybe a higher purpose and wanting to help people or wanting to put a product, but then also everyday life comes in and we are tired or we have interesting private things going on.
Yeah.
And how do you think about this as a single person? You are to an extent responsible, but this can also happen in an organizational structure, obviously, that people have sometimes are more excited about their work and sometimes more other things are going on. But then to an extent, the organization is suffering or benefiting at this, depending on what happens.
I heard two parts to that question. One is the interesting, let's call it, tension between us being individuals and being social beings. So we need community and we need autonomy. Yeah. And the other question was about organizations. How do we what do we do as an organization when we are dealing with people who are sometimes more, sometimes less engaged, sometimes more, sometimes less motivated? And this is true for in the number of people. Some will be more motivated, some will be less motivated, some will be more purpose-driven, some less. And then in the individual, in any individual over time, things will go up and down. This is really, really important. I think, and this is something I'm struggling with right now, practically in an organization I'm working with. The problem I think that we have is that with this kind of organization that we currently built with, or that's currently so popular with purpose and values and mission, vision, and all of this, and people having fun at work and people expressing themselves through their work and people having fulfillment from the work. This is all very beautiful if it happens as an invitation. So if I go to work and I have a chance to be motivated, I have an invitation to be engaged, if I am passionate, that's welcome and that's useful, awesome. But if we have an organization that depends on me being motivated, me being passionate, and unless I am passionate and motivated and engaged, the organization won't work, then we just have a really bad organization. So at the moment, this is also a leadership problem, because leadership assumes that a very, like the term, the concept, the connotations with leadership, when we say I'm leading you, has two implicit connotations that are both very wrong. One is that there is a cause and effect relationship between what I do and what you do, which there isn't. We're both autonomous beings, and whatever I do to you, you always have a choice to respond, right? When I say jump, you can say how high, or you can say fuck off. So there's no way to instruct. A human being is not a machine that you can instruct to do something. And the more important thing regarding your question of system or organization versus individuals is leadership. Me leading you as a concept implies that the most important factor for our success is what you do and what I do. But the most important factor is always in the system. Like there was this 95% rule, I think it was by Deming, said 5% of somebody's performance is individual and 95% is due to the system they are in. So system makes up 95% of the performance. And leadership, especially the leadership of individuals and the focusing on individual motivation, individual purpose, individual engagement, individual passion, which are all individual things that human beings bring into the organization. If we rely on those, then we are not building good organizations. We're building organizations that barely function and that are somehow, let's say, oiled into functioning by people who basically give themselves. And I think that's very dangerous. And I've seen organizations where that is borderline abusive or exploitative. And that's something that I'm currently struggling with, because there are people who say this whole purpose, passion, etc. fashion is just especially tech industry myth that was put in the world because it serves these organizations extremely well, because people work a lot in these organizations where they have fun and etc. But in the end, the organization is better benefiting, or the people owning the organization, not the people working there. And that's the thing that worries me. Like when you look at Jeff Sutherland's book about Scrum called Twice the Work in Half the Time, it doesn't have a chapter about how to pay higher wages to those people who are working more efficiently and effectively. So yeah, that's something that worries me a little bit.
So I'm a scientist by training, and I've worked in large research institutions where like thousands of scientists work together, but also as individuals. And there's a lot of purpose, and I don't think any scientist is ever driven by money, because you don't get so much. But with there's always a strong energy to go to big institutions, and the reason for this is because you are you're suddenly in an environment and you have the money, but also the people around you which are interesting and intelligent, and you get new ideas. However, some people are working usually also over hours and so on, but other than in say maybe more product driven companies, it's more the fact that the individual, if he or she is doing a cool experiment or finds something completely new, is actually benefiting a lot from the fact that he or she is an environment. But it also relies on the fact that a lot of people are working hard and not getting anything out.
It's a bit like a lottery.
It's a lottery, basically.
However, or like capitalism. It's a mechanism where anyone can get rich, but not everyone.
But I think the funny thing about the example of this is that it's not money driven at all by people, and it's also people getting out of these research institutions, or quite a few will tell you, oh, never again, but it doesn't stop the income of people. So for the PhD programs, usually more than 10 times of the amount taken will be applying. And do you think this has something to do with the human nature, or I think
I think this is a good example of an exploiting system. And yes, it's exploiting human nature, but it's also it's the basic exploitation of the way our society is organized. Like we have an organizational system. Capitalism is one way to look at it, but it's not the whole thing. Where very many people are motivated by the fact that some of them have an opportunity to get up. And yes, in research, it's maybe less about the big bucks than it is in product industry, where you want to make millions of dollars for yourself, or at least a couple $100,000. But in research, it's about status, and it's about being seen, it's about being recognized, etc. And everybody who's going in knows that not everybody is going to get that recognition, but the hope of me being one of those that might get the recognition is driving people. And the way the system is organized is enough people get recognized, and there's enough visibility between those, and then you have leadership in terms of, oh, I get to work with that person, they are already famous. If I co-publish a paper with them, my name will be on a paper that is cited quite often, so my rank is higher, etc., etc. And this is very similar, like when you look at organizations like Google, and I don't have a lot of inside knowledge of Google, so I'm just using generalized stuff that I heard as an example. If Google is actually different, please forgive me. I think they can take it. It's a system that has, I don't know, 10 or 15 levels of hierarchy, which come with benefits, money and others. It comes with a very, very clear grading system with stack ranking, where regularly, maybe once a year, I don't know exactly how often, you get ranked against your colleagues, and the best ones get promoted. And you're right, the motivation for these people at Google is different from the people in the big research organization, but the system is very similar. And it's I think systems like this exist all over the world in lots of different realms. Like when you look at I don't know. I don't want to get into too much of a political or sociological conversation, but I think these systems are at the heart of what makes our current world tick and makes it work like it works. It's also the reason why people who don't benefit from the things that the top gets vote for keeping that system in place, like why so many voters vote against their personal financial interests, because they vote in the financial interest of their future selves that they hope to become. And they don't want higher taxes for the rich because they think, what if I get rich and then I need to pay all this tax? No, and stuff like that. So, yeah, it is in human nature to, at least in our learned human nature. I'm not sure if somebody who hasn't grown up in our Western system that is very typical almost all over the planet right now, if somebody would not want that, but in our system, people are definitely educated to want this.
Yeah, so along those lines, it's, I think, really interesting for me that we always, like, so usually people are very proud to be working for Google or for large research organizations and so on, but at the same time they want to recognized for the individuality, but also I feel it's not only the individuality, but being like competitive to your neighbor who works maybe in the same organization, maybe one desk further.
Yeah.
And what's your take on this? Because it seems to be all very relative, and only relativity seems to, like, this relativity seems to make a difference for us humans.
So I don't believe that human beings are naturally competitive.
Okay.
I think we are creating systems where they are. I'm absolutely not I'm not a scientist who can explain all the details of this. But I do remember reading about research on chimps, interestingly, who are supposedly very competitive. And when you read, what's the name of this woman, Diane Fossey, I think. When you read her accounts from when she was observing chimps in the wild before she started doing the actual research, because the actual research is relying on regular observations of chimps in the same environment. And what they do in order to create that is they feed them. So they actually create an artificial system where suddenly there's scarcity, because obviously the bananas, they feed the chimps so that they can come and so that the chimps come and the researchers can observe them. And then they observe fighting about this limited resource of food. But this is something that happens when human beings introduce inequality in the system and introduce scarcity in a system that didn't have that before. Yeah, when you read, what's the name of the book? I don't currently remember the author or the title, but somebody recently published a book about human beings being generally good and cooperative, and he was debunking several myths, like the Lord of the Flies story and several others, where so basically gathering research on, like, what do we actually know about how humans naturally behave. And so my take is, if we create systems where people don't need to compete, and they're not incentivized to compete, then there's a lot less likelihood that they will be competitive. And if they want to be competitive for sport, etc., I don't think that's bad either. So I don't think competition is bad per se. Competition has brought us a lot of inventions and things like that. But at the moment, I think it's a true, our society and our economy is focused too much on this. So, which is one of the reasons for the climate crisis and for our difficulties to get out of this. So what this is related to, and what I would like to relate it to in the conversation, is our two innate drives to, earlier I said individual versus community. Our innate drives are, as Gabor Mate frequently says, our two primary drivers are authenticity and attachment. So we need attachment as babies because we die if we don't get it, and we still get sick and stressed, and, traumatized, and cancer, and lots of other bad things when we don't have attachment as adults. But we also need to express ourselves. We need to be ourselves. We need to. We want to be seen for who we are individually. I don't think this is a thing that was definitely amplified a lot by the Western civilization. But I don't think it's something that other people don't have at all. They just have a different balance between the community and individual. Like other cultures tend to have a higher value on community and lower value on the individual. But I think all human beings have this tension between both and need to integrate and balance both. And in organizations, that's extremely important because any organization has competing interests between the people who own the organization, the people who want the product of the organization, people who work in the organization. And the classical role of management was to create good compromises between the workers' interests, the customers' interests, suppliers' interests, society's interests, and the owner's interest, and to make sure that everybody got something, but nobody got to break the system. And our current way of questioning management, changing management, maybe not having management at all, which I think is generally a good idea. I think rethinking and reinventing how management is done in an organization is important. But that creates burden on people who didn't need to have this burden before. So as a person responsible for balancing out competing interests of various parties, you are bearing responsibility. You are carrying a dilemma. You are responsible for basically finding good solutions for lots of conflicts. And not everybody wants that. So we have people who are coming back to how much leadership do people want in their organization, because I think this is related. So leadership in this context could reframe leadership as maybe the ability, willingness to hold attention, so that from that tension something new can emerge and some new solution might come. But most people avoid tensions. They don't like tension because they do make life more interesting, but they also make life more difficult. And I think some people like that more and less in general, but also some people are willing to and interested in having tensions at work more than others.
Yeah, but I think the reason for this is basically if there's a lot of tension, then the spotlight is on you. And this is going back to this a bit more tribal idea, like either you're having the idea of doing something new and doing something good for the group, but also being then loved and cherished for your new invention, or you're thrown out because you're not part of one of us, and we don't like you anymore. You're not part of the group.
Yeah.
So I think, I think to my knowledge, gorillas and chimpanzees have a similar issue in the sense that they need to be in a group, otherwise they get eaten by predators. But at the same time, they want to be the strongest chimp or the strongest gorilla in order to reproduce. But at the same time, they don't want to get rid of all the other males, because then they would die lonely and being eaten by a tiger or something else, which is a similar, which can be thought as a similar issue of groups, because you don't want and you don't want to constantly fight fight within your organization, but also be clear, okay, so I'm the boss here and I'm the second boss or whatever, because if you constantly would fight also among gorillas, then eventually they will eventually they will die. And according to some biologists, this is why depression comes into place at mammals, because if you're basically not killing your biggest leader, you just stay silent and stay calm, then you're not getting eaten. You might get a female or so, but you survived, and you survived the group, and you can stay in the tribe forever, basically.
Which means that your submissive genes will be passed on, and then we have this tendency. Yeah, I'm not sure I agree to all of that argumentation, but it definitely makes sense. And how do we bring that back to our question of organization? So I think
what's the analogy for me is that there's the idea of being, do we all want to be the same individual and all bring us forward, but we also know that together we work actually best and bring, or do we want to have one leader to make the final decision, which also kind of implies that some of the ideas have to be abandoned or not so much
and
thought of.
And the good thing is that when we look at human organizations in general, we don't have to choose between the two, because we can have both kinds of organizations. And even within one big organization, you could have different places where in one place there's a stronger, we are looking up to one leader culture, and in other places there's more of a collaborative, we are doing this together and we're leading together culture. That again would be a tension in the organization, but organizations are there to manage tensions. So that's not a problem per se. But the interesting question is, for which kind of organization is which thing more useful? So the one, and it doesn't, there's more models, right? Just for simplification, we have taken two extreme simplifications. So the one leader decides and everybody does what they say, is very effective for certain kinds of problems, and it has very fast decision making. It's very easy and very low responsibility for the people who work there, right? It's always clear who to blame when something doesn't work, because the reason is always at the top. And so it is fairly simple. And there are lines of work where this works. There are organizations that survive that way, and there are organizations that have survived for decades or even longer. And I think there are certain industries or certain areas of work where this kind of organization is dying out, because it can't compete with organizations that are more innovative and more, and if they are more innovative, they are probably more collaborative and more cooperative, at least to some extent inside. And not every business needs that. So when you are into any line of business or any venture, it doesn't have to be business, any organization that needs to learn a lot, that needs to innovate a lot, that needs to discover a lot of new stuff, you probably want a lot of independent brains, not limited by much structure and or hierarchy. And you want to give them the conditions to work together very well, because multiple brains think exponentially better than single brains. And then the interesting question is, how do we build such organizations? I think we have some experience by now, but not a lot. We definitely have not found the way to do this, although a lot of people currently claim they have and try to earn a lot of money by selling the solution to other companies. And because we all love simple solutions, there's always a market for that, and people are buying this. Yeah, so my task is to figure out like what scaffolding do we need for organizations that want to try these new kinds of organizing. Because I think we have a lot of good ideas that work in some contexts. Agile ways of working work well in teams, given a certain kind of work. When discovery and learning is more important than efficiency, then agile ways of working are really useful. So far we haven't found a good way of having these ways of working work well together with other ways of working in the same organization. There's often tensions that people do not know how to manage well. And another thing that we haven't found how to do well is how to transform an organization that's working in a certain way into a new organization that works in a certain way. Apart from several good examples for transformation happening in desperate circumstances or with desperate measures. So when a company is breaking down because something bad is happening, and then something re-emerges, which is actually a different organization, just happening to have the same name often. That works, but this is not something you can intentionally do to an organization, destroy it so that it reinvents itself. Although something that probably neither the shareholders, nor the stakeholders, nor the employees would really want. So that's an interesting topic.
I think what is always the questions is what we said or what we talked earlier, like that people have maybe different needs or maybe different ideas, or what you mentioned, but at the same time make it clear that they all are needed in order to form a greater something, and that they are not taking advantage of it in a sense that they not work anymore.
Yeah. And as you're saying that, I don't think every kind of person is needed in every organization. So I don't think any organization should aim for being the right organization for everyone. I think being clear, like this is the opposite side of what Dave Snowden calls bounded applicability. So he frequently says that when you have a method, the most important thing you need to know is for which kind of problem is this a good method, and what are the boundaries? So where do you not apply this? And the flip side to this is when we have an organization and we want to build an organization, or we want to grow or change an organization, to really think about for what kind of problems and challenges, what kind of products, what kind of markets, but also what kind of employees. And people talk about diversity a lot these days, and I think in general, like diversity and inclusion are important topics. Absolutely no problem there, but it's not a value in itself to an organization. So we need to make sure that we add attention to diversity where it's actually useful for the people and for the organization, and not just take this as a goal in itself, as some people take Agile as a goal in itself. Like, let's go Agile. No. What for? Let's go diverse. Wait, what for? So what specifically do we want to achieve? And this is going back to what I said earlier about leadership. Make a difference with intention. So just changing something for the sake of changing it is not a very wise thing, usually.
Okay, so I want to finish with my final sentence. My final question is like, what's your approach? How do you as a coach assess this kind of problems when you come into or when you are asked to deal with a new company which you're not knowing beforehand?
It depends a little bit of who is asking me and what they're asking me for. Ideally, I would like to have a workshop with a spectrum of people from different parts of the organization, different levels of the organization, if it's a hierarchy. And if it's a hierarchy where we still have a lot of power at the top, I would probably, in addition to running a workshop with those many people and many different views, I would also have a smaller conversation with the people at the top to have their understanding, their intentions, their direction, because I've been involved in too many transformations that had very optimistic ideas, for instance, collected from the people doing the work. And then in the end, the transformation didn't happen because the people at the top had a totally different idea. So making sure that I understand what people want and where they are, and help them figure out how will they know they have it, like whatever it is. So when they say, hey, we want Agile, then I would ask, okay, how would you know that you're Agile? What do you want to achieve using Agile? What are the indicators that show you that you are becoming more Agile? And asking multiple people in the organization how they would know that would give us information framing what would success look like. And then looking for the people who want to make that happen and help them do that. So try not to take the responsibility away from the organization and not take their responsibility for them, but help them take the responsibility for whatever they want to do. So one thing that I have done often in my career, mostly long ago, but it still happens, and that I see a lot of coaches do, inside and outside of Agile, is that we want change more than the personal system we're serving. And that's a, well, if you put a blunt word to it, that's abusive. There's a very beautiful quote that I love that frames this. You can't build a better world for people. Only people can build a better world for people. Otherwise, it's just a cage. That's Granny Weatherwax in some Terry Pratchett novel that I'm not exactly sure which one. And I think that's very wise. So especially us who claim that we have understood more than others about how an organization works, what people need, etc., etc., etc. It's really easy to fall into this trap. Oh, I know how this should be. No, maybe we know, but it's not our call to decide for the others. We can help them go where they want to go if we happen to have the means and the motivation to get them there. But it's not our call to decide where they should be going.
So to me, it sounds as if one of the beauties of your job is that you will find out unexpected things because other people create them and you cannot imagine them.
Absolutely, yes.
Is happening.
Yeah.
And I think this is where creativity and also a lot of imagination and joy comes for us human beings. And I think this is also one of the things besides it's like together we can find new things and you help the organizations to do this. And I think that's a very cool thing to do.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I would like to finish. I want to say thank you for answering all my questions.
Thank you. This was exciting and awesome. Yeah.
And also, staying and going with me on routes I also didn't expect. And I thought this was very, very enlightening. And I will have a very good day today. And also, I hope many good weeks coming along.
Awesome. Thank you very much for this conversation. Thank anyone who listened so far. And yeah, connect to us if you have any questions, if you want us to go deeper into anything, I'm sure we can repeat this kind of conversation at some point in the future when we know this is interesting. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.